Thank you for watching this presentation on E-free technology. My name is Philip Jung. I am a chemical process engineer, so my approach to internal combustion engines is probably a bit different than most mechanical engineers. An engine to me is a device in which a chemical reaction is converting a chemical, in this case fuel, to power. I will present a method of starting an engine with no gaseous emissions. This is a simple but non-obvious solution to a complex problem. Starting an engine, particularly during a cold start, but also during a warm start, is a major source of emissions. These emissions are due to a cold combustion chamber and a cold environmental treatment system. These emissions can be eliminated by starting an engine with no gaseous discharge. I will describe this technology, how to apply this technology, including how low you can go in emissions, and how to monetize this technology by generating emission reduction credits. There are several abbreviations that we will be using. The one new one possibly is emission reduction credits. You may not be familiar with this. It is a credit earned by reducing emissions below what is required by permit or by rule. What is emitted early in an engine start? During the first 300 seconds of cold start on FTP 75, 78% of the hydrocarbons, 57% of the NOx, and 75% of the particulates based on the total emissions at the end of testing. These emissions are termed gross emissions. In FTP 75, there is an initial cold start phase, followed by a stabilized phase, then a 10-minute cool down period, followed by an engine restart, which I have called a warm start. This technology uses in-vehicle generated hydrogen and oxygen to cold start and possibly warm start an engine. The resulting water is removed by condensation while the oxygen is recycled to the engine. Power from the engine is used to generate electricity, which is then used to electrolyze water to produce hydrogen and oxygen. Power is also used to compress these gases. Emissions generated during the use of this power must be accounted for. The emissions released during this power generation result in a decrease to the gross emissions reduction. Net reduction of emissions is the result and is always less than the gross emissions. The gross emissions during the running of FTP 75 are shown in this plot. THC is shown in blue, NOx is shown in green, and particulates are shown in purple. There is a very high rate of THC, NOx, and particulates emitted in the first 50 seconds of engine operation. 63% of the THC and 33% of both NOx and particulates in the first 50 seconds. This is followed by a constant rate of emission up to the point where the engine is stopped for a 10-minute cooling down period right here. Following the restart, after the 10-minute cool down, there's a further rapid increase in NOx and THC, while particulates remain fixed or flat from about 800 seconds to the end of testing. Gross emissions are shown here, with net emissions always less than gross emissions. Since NMOG plus NOx is a major concern in the US, we will look at it separately. This plot is a composite of both THC plus NOx emitted on FTP 75. 32% of THC plus NOx is emitted in the first 25 seconds of a cold start, 51% in the first 50 seconds, and 70% is emitted in the first 250 seconds. Emissions are steady after 250 seconds. After the warm restart, there is a sudden increase in emitted THC plus NOx, which trails off after 200 seconds of warm start. This plot shows the net reduction of THC plus NOx by using cold start alone in the gray line, which is the lower line. It also shows the net reduction of THC plus NOx by using both cold start and warm start in the upper black line. Several of the data points, for instance here, show the seconds of cold start are seconds of cold start and warm start in parentheses. There is no advantage to using warm start alone. The maximum net reduction possible is 72% by using 250 seconds of cold start and 200 seconds of warm start. E-free technology is set up using an electrolyzer, compressors, storage tanks for both gases, pressure regulation for oxygen, flow control for hydrogen, an air block valve to prevent air from entering the engine, an exhaust block valve to prevent exhaust from exhausting the engine, a condenser to remove water from the products of combustion, and a recycle of oxygen back to the front of the engine. So this is how we start, how we use E-free technology. The electrolyzer uses electricity to produce oxygen and hydrogen. We compress and store these as gases. We seal off the air inlet and the exhaust from the engine and fill the engine with oxygen. We inject hydrogen into the engine right here, into the combustion chamber, and then combust it. We condense the resulting water out of the condenser, through the condenser. We recycle the oxygen to the front of the engine. Control for this is provided by the ECU. These are the U.S. regulated fleet emissions from light-duty vehicles for NMOG plus NOx and PM in milligrams per mile. I will be discussing the average from 2023 forward. CARB is also discussing some additional requirements as well as these, such as reducing NMOG plus NOx down to 20 milligrams per mile from 30, measure the emissions under varying cold soak conditions, adding limits for the first 5 seconds of engine operation, and adding a limit for high-powered cold start on hybrids. E-free technology can address each of these requirements since it can be used to eliminate gaseous emissions during both cold start and warm start. We will cover the U.S. requirement first and then the EU requirement. So the first scenario, let's say you can meet the 2023 average requirement of 45.5 milligrams NMOG plus NOx per mile. How can you meet the 2025 average requirement of 30 milligrams per mile? This requires a reduction of 34.1%. If we examine the recent slide, it shows that 50 seconds of cold start using E-free technology will give a 49.5% reduction. The estimated level will then be 23 milligrams per mile, meeting the requirement. There's a second scenario. You can meet the 2023 average of 45.5, but now you'd like to be able to meet the possible 2028 CARB requirement of 20 milligrams NMOG plus NOx per mile. This requires a reduction of 56%. Examining the recent slide shows that 250 seconds of cold start using E-free technology will give a 59.3% reduction. The estimated level would then be 18.5 milligrams per mile. Is there another option? Yes, there is. You still need a 56% reduction in NMOG plus NOx per mile to reach 20 milligrams per mile. A second option is to use both cold and warm start. This can also be found on the recent slide. 50 seconds of cold start and 50 seconds of warm start will give a reduction of 57.6%. A third option is to use 75 seconds of cold start and 50 seconds of warm start. This will give a reduction of 59.5%. The estimated levels from each of these will be 19.3 milligrams per mile in the first case and 18.4 milligrams per mile in the second case. As far as Europe goes, it's difficult to say what the Euro 7 requirements will be since they're not to be released until early 2022. The reduction in measured particle size and number will have an effect on the particle filtration required, even though a reduction greater than 50% is easily achieved with E-free technology. The U.S. requirement of 30 milligrams NMOG plus NOx per mile required in 2025 equates to a 7.5 milligram NOx per kilometer, indicating that less than 10 milligrams NOx per kilometer is readily available. The reduced cold start temperature should have minimal effect, as previously discussed. In the U.S., the major concern is the generation of NOx and particulate number. Let's explore the NOx reduction possible. Let's look at two scenarios for the EU. The scenario 1, you just meet the Euro 6 NOx requirement of less than 60 milligrams of NOx per kilometer, and you'd like to meet the suggested Euro 7 requirement of 30 milligrams per kilometer. How can you meet the Euro 7 requirement? A reduction of 50% is needed. Examining the previous slide, which shows that using 250 seconds of cold start and 50 seconds of warm start using E-free technology will give a 56.9% reduction in NOx per kilometer. The estimated level will then be 25.9 milligrams per kilometer. There may be a less expensive option than meeting the current U.S. requirement. This figure shows the net reduction of NOx by using cold start alone, which is in the green line. It also shows the net reduction of NOx by using both cold start and warm start, and that's shown in the upper curve, which is in dark green. Several of the data points show the seconds of cold start and seconds of warm start. The maximum net reduction possible of NOx is 63.9, which is shown right here, by using 250 seconds of cold start and 200 seconds of warm start. So you are meeting the Euro 6 requirement of particulate number of less than 6 times 10 to the 11 particles per kilometer. You'd like to meet the suggested Euro 7 number of less than 1 times 10 to the 11 particles per kilometer. How can you meet this requirement? This requires a reduction in particulate number of 83.3%. 500 seconds of cold start using E-free technology will give 84.7% reduction in particles per kilometer. The estimated level will then be 0.92 times 10 to the 11. However, doing this will cause the NOx per kilometer to fail the requirements. Improving particle filtration may be a better alternative than using this technology. So, are there any benefits to more than meeting the requirements? Well, yes, you can be a good citizen of the world by emitting less THC, NOx, and particulates. You can also generate emission reduction credits, which can be used as a source of revenue. If you If you emit less than you are allowed to emit, the difference can then be sold to other companies. What level of emissions are possible? Assume you're achieving the fleet average of 45.5 milligrams per mile, and you're meeting 3 milligrams of particulate mass per mile in 2023. Basically, you're just meeting the requirement. By using a cold start of 250 seconds and a warm start of 100 seconds, the resulting emissions will be 13.62 milligrams NMOG plus NOx per mile and 0.944 milligrams particulate mass per mile. In 2023, this level of performance would generate revenue of $40 million in ERC per million vehicles. In 2024, this level would generate $69 million in revenue. In 2025, this level would generate $90 million in revenue. The PM level between 3 and 0.94 milligrams per mile are included in these revenue figures. So what is the value of ERC? Based on South Coast Air Quality Management District annual publications of emission reduction credit transactions for calendar years 2018 and 2019, the value of traded ERCs was as follows. THC, hydrocarbons, volatile organic compounds, reactive organic compounds had a value of $15,000 per metric ton. The NOx had a value of $275,000 per metric ton. The PM10 had a value of $579,000 per metric ton. Based on 1 million vehicles per year, 2.15 starts per day, and the 2018-2019 value ERC for 10 years gives cumulative revenue as shown below. And here is the cumulative revenue. In 2023, it'd be 40 million. 2024, the cumulative would be 110 million. The income for that year would be about 70. 2025, the cumulative would be 200, while in that year alone it would be 89.9. So this is what would be possible in generating ERC. It could then be sold for revenue. So on a plot of that, we start out at 40 million in 2023 and work up to 1.6 billion after 10 years. In summary, this technology can be used to meet current and future regulations. It will work equally well on light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles. If you meet current regulations of 45.5 milligrams of THC plus NOx per mile, then 13.6 milligrams is possible. Emissions from colder starts, the first 5 seconds of cold starts, warm restarts, and high power starts are readily solved using this technology. It can be used to give an extra degree of compliance rather than just meeting the regulations. It can future-proof your emissions by modifying the ECU to add more time for cold starts and more time for warm restarts. So this technology can be used to meet environmental requirements and to generate revenue. Here are the references used in this presentation. I thank you very much for your time, for listening. If you'd like to contact me with any questions or to challenge me on the figures, feel free. Here is my contact information. Thank you very much for your attention.